Today's talk is going to focus on the art of discipline. I say art of discipline because oftentimes when we think of discipline, we think of the rigidity of things, how hard it might be to commit to a practice or to commit to a discipline. And so I'm going to share a little bit of my journey on how I came to see discipline in a different way and kind of where I started with my mindset, and perhaps through some of the work that I've done with building discipline in my life, this can be a service to you too as you try to incorporate new disciplines. And so my early thinking about discipline was that indeed it was often rigid. It was very hard to commit to discipline. And I would look at people who had built disciplines into their lives and would be thinking, oh my gosh, that must be really hard what they're doing. It must be hard the way that they're living. And so that was, for me, thinking that wasn't quite accurate. And as I started to build disciplines into my life, I started to learn that there's a lot more to discipline than just willpower. And so this started for me really back in 2016 on the way to 2017 when I was 250 pounds and I committed to a discipline to do yoga. And this was a 30-day yoga challenge that I committed to. And what was interesting about this practice is that as I kept going, the discipline got easier to do. And so there's this momentum that comes into play that I wasn't quite aware of when I had very little discipline in my life. Another interesting thing that happens, I think, when we're on the road to building disciplines into our lives is there's a carryover and a transfer effect from one discipline to another area. And so it was interesting as I was doing the yoga, I started to lean into eating more plant-based, and I was building a discipline to eat plant-based as well, alongside my yoga practice. And so what made the process of incorporating more discipline into my diet was the discipline I had on my yoga mat. And so these things kind of built on each other, and there's a synergy that we get when we're building through these disciplines. Another aspect I think that's related to discipline and why I call it the art of discipline has everything to do with how we imagine ourselves moving forward and the troubles and tribulations that show up when we're building that new discipline. Because what we're doing, in essence, is we're rewriting an old program that used to be there, right? So if our regular program has been, to stop at McDonald's every Wednesday on the way home from work, and then suddenly we're going to decide that we're going to have a healthy meal on Wednesdays, the old programming is still there. And so the initial part of the discipline that's hard is actually rewriting those old programs so that we can actually start to feel like that new discipline is really who we are. I think that this is where we start to build values into our lives. And I like to think that mood follows action. So a lot of times when we commit to these disciplines, it starts to incorporate new values into us, right? And so I started to value my health and well-being so much more as a product of my commitment to disciplines in terms of physical fitness, yoga, and meditation, those kinds of things. So those were in the service of creating a new sense of identity and values within me. And so as I reflect back and think about the old way that I thought about discipline to how I think of it now, we really are, discipline is what makes us more free. And so there's so much more freedom and discipline than I originally thought. My life is so much easier when I have incorporated more and more discipline. And I'm still a work in progress too, so I don't think anyone is really finished with finding ways to incorporate better discipline in their lives. So I'm still working on building better discipline too. And I think that one way that is a great kind of angle that you can take as you try to build more discipline is to make and keep one simple promise to yourself about something that's attainable, right? And so when we think about how and when are we going to keep a commitment and keep a promise we make to ourselves, it has to have a level of challenge that's attainable for us, right? So if I haven't done any running for a long time and I make a promise to myself to run 10 miles tomorrow, that's really kind of an unattainable prospect because I haven't done any running in a long time. And so it's much better, I think, to make a promise and keep a promise for an activity or an action for you that is giving you a little bit of challenge, enough so that it's stretching you a bit, but not overstretching you. right? So to me, that's a sweet spot that you have to determine what works for you. So if you're someone who wants to commit to running, maybe commit to running a half mile or a mile, especially if you haven't done any running at all. If you want to commit to more flexibility, maybe commit to one 20-minute stretch session that you can do at your house, right? And set a time and a date for it so that when that time and date comes, you fulfill that promise, right? And this is a great way to also build character. So we're talking about building values and character by way of discipline. And so this is something that I've learned so much more about as I've built different disciplines into my life. And so I'll leave you just with one final thought about building disciplines too, is that there is a self-love and self-acceptance component that should be kind of part of the whole process, because you know, being more kind and gentle with yourself as you adopt these new disciplines and as you kind of incorporate new habits that you're trying to build a better version of yourself, the old version is kind of melting away. And we want to be kind and gentle to ourselves because it allows us to actually reflect on the times when we might make a mistake and go back to our old habits. And then we can start reflecting on why we did that. What was the circumstances and the context for how and why we ended up going back to an old habit that we didn't necessarily want to do. And I think that having a bit of self-love and a playfulness to the way that we're incorporating disciplines can make it feel a little less rigid when we first get started. And so just to close off, I want to thank everybody for watching the video. I hope that, and I trust that there's value in what we're talking about here on this channel, and that you will find value in building discipline into your life in whatever way makes most sense for you.